Okay, so where did all this start? When did it start? We have been hearing about mobile apps for quite some time now, maybe 4 years, 5 years, but actually it goes back much beyond that. It's somewhere in the 70s was the first handheld cell phone used by, developed by Motorola in their labs. And the first commercial automated cellular network was in Japan, and that was in 1979. So it really goes back a long time. And chiefly the usage of this technology was in embedded systems, in vehicle systems. It's only towards 1996 when the Palm OS came out for PDAs. I'm sure some of you might remember seeing those big, a little bit bigger than your scientific calculator. You must have seen that. And this came with features like handwriting recognition, etc. And Windows CE, Embedded Compact Handheld PC, was, the other addition in that year. Then, of course, came Nokia S40, and this was the first phone to have a wireless browser, which was again a trendsetter. You could actually use it to browse the internet. Then, of course, in 2000 came Symbian with 2G, and Symbian was the most prominent operating system in all Nokia phones prior to its takeover by Microsoft in as recent as 2012. So that was a very powerful, and that is still a very powerful operating system. And in 2001, the Palm OS came up with an improved version. And of course, in 2002, we saw BlackBerry OS and the improved Windows CE. And BlackBerry was used for corporate mail, and it also had its own WAP, Wireless Application Protocol. And in 2005, Memo OS was developed in Nokia Labs, but it was an open source, and it was based on the Debian Linux operating system. Then in 2007, Apple iOS came out with 3G. So not only was it, you could browse the web and do, email and everything, but there was live audio, video streaming, and, in true typical Apple fashion, it was a revolution. This was quickly followed by Android from Google in 2008. And then, of course, we had the Samsung guys come up with Bada OS in 2009. And 2010 was, of course, Windows 8. And the most recent one is the 2012 Firefox operating system. This is, again a trendsetter, because nowadays you see in the market a lot of smart TVs. So basically Firefox kind of jump-started this whole trend, or this whole technology revolution. So as you see, mobile operating system history has got its roots, like almost 40, 50 years back. So it's pretty old, and it has kind of matured over the years. And what we see today in the market are basically the top 4, which are your Android, by Google, and it's open source. Then iOS from Apple Incorporated, which is closed source and proprietary. Bada OS is from Samsung Electronics, and they are also closed source, but they are moving towards, open source. And of course, Windows Phone from Microsoft, which is again closed source and proprietary. So these are the 4 main operating systems which are there in the market today. And primarily app development, most of the app development happens using these 4. All right, so this is the elephant in the room, right? Why iOS? Why not Android? You have seen people having very strong views about either of the system. Either people love iOS, or they are, it's a camp. It's like 2 camps. So why, why all this discussion? Why is it happening? And how do you decide, basically, where do you want to develop, right? When you start, you have to make this decision as a business owner or as an app developer. You have to make this decision. Which app, which operating system or which platform will my app be supporting, or what I will be using as a primary source of development, right? So these are some of the questions that you need to ask yourself before you come up with an answer. Obviously, the first thing is to look for visitor statistics. What are your current users using right now? And analyze that portion of mobile visitors from iOS or Android. Right, so where are they coming from? Obviously, if you have majority of your users using an iPhone, it makes more sense for you to use to build an app on the iOS platform. Whereas if they're coming from Android, then you might want to look up at Android app development also. The second question you would ask is, what are your tablet plans? Are you planning to have an app which is supported on the tablets as well? Because if that is so, then at least here there is not much of an ambiguity, because iPad is clearly the winner in the tablet market. And if you plan on if you plan on creating a tablet experience for your user, then you should focus on the iOS first. And yes, do you want to charge for your application? Majority of the apps are free, right? And of course, they are not free entirely, because once you have ad support, then that is a very big chunk of revenue for the app developer. But this is one question you would want to ask, because iOS users are more willing and more likely to pay for an application than Android users. If you see the user base, there are big firms which have done a lot of analysis and market studies, and from those findings, what has come out is that typically an iOS user is more they want the good things in life, and so they don't mind paying for it. Whereas an Android user is slightly geeky, and he comes from a background where they don't mind working with nuts and bolts. So they look for apps which are free, which are which they can build upon. So that is like the general demographic, and you would want to factor in that as well when you're trying to decide which platform to use. And yes, as you know, it's so popular. iOS is like the most popular operating system in the US, strictly from user point of view. And generally also in developed countries, it's got a much more broader user base than in developing countries. So again, who is your target demographic? Who is your target user? You will be wanting to develop apps in that platform for them. Great. Now, we all know what how there's a lot of flux in the industry, in the mobile industry, right? There was like BlackBerry was like it was like God, and Nokia, they were the front runners some years back. But today, where are they? They're hardly there. They're nowhere. And so obviously the question would be, will Apple or Google fail? But fortunately, they have their roots very well embedded in not only in the market, but also they have huge investments in future technology trends and so on. So at least now the forecast is that they're not going to have any much problems. And also Apple has a very large loyal brand following and a very good entrenched ecosystem. So people have invested a lot in this ecosystem, and it has more than 1 million loyal customers. So the statistics speak for themselves. Okay, so that was like from the business point of view. Now, if we were to compare these two systems, purely on technical merit, then there is a graph here, which is there is a table here, I'm sorry, with certain points which you would want to come back later and refer to. Right now, if it's too technical, do not worry, because we are just summarizing the differences between both. As you go through the course, you will come back to this, and your understanding will be much better. So for now, just stay with me while I walk you through the basic features. So the development environment in iOS is Xcode. I think most of you would have already heard of it, or if not downloaded it, then this is the IDE that you need. Absolutely necessary. This is the only IDE which you can use for iOS development. And on the other hand, Android has Eclipse. So people from Java background, people from open source technologies, you are already familiar with this IDE. And the Xcode IDE is pretty slick, and it's powerful. It's very fast, and it's nicely integrated. So and the debugger works seamlessly. It does not break. You do not have to go searching for breakpoints, etc. It's pretty decent, and the simulator is fast and responsive. It is it also gives support for a lot of various devices which have come. As soon as iPhone comes up with a new version, the simulator also has a corresponding version. So basically, the simulator is within your laptop or your Mac, and when you develop your apps, it is not necessary that you need an iPhone. You can simulate. So that's the reason why it's called as a simulator. You can simulate the performance of your app, the running of your app on the simulator. So, and this is a the performance of this simulator is pretty fast, and it's a good simulator. On the other hand, Android is the earlier versions of to begin with, Eclipse was a fairly decent IDE, but it's been in typical Android fashion, it's been customized with a lot of plugins, and that makes it kind of wobbly and slow and complex. And debugger is quite clumsy, and the emulator takes minutes to launch. By the way, this difference is this table is it's come from the industry, and which is both business and users. So it's not something that you're going for iOS development, and hence it's not a biased kind of thing. This is a general view of the industry. So there are some good features of Android also, very powerful. So let's see. Configuration. So when you configure your apps, when you port them to different environments or different systems, iOS has a pretty roundabout configuration because it has macros, it has header files and projects. So there are a lot of settings, build settings that you have to do, and build configurations. Whereas in Android, there's a single manifest file. And in fact, the IDE does it for you completely. Okay, so user interface design, user experience this is no surprise, I'm sure. It's Apple has always been the front runner, and the interface builder is the prime, the storyboard. This is where you will be building your app interface, user interface, and it's very sleek. But the auto layout feature that they have is that is it's a slightly problematic. Basically, it's a feature which you can use to so that automatically the layout is configured between, say, iPhone 5s and iPhone 6. So auto layout is the feature. We can also programmatically configure it for different versions. But in case of, on the other hand, in case of Android, we have to write a lot of XML files for different layout guidelines. So it's more lot of coding and lot of configuring in Android. Okay, so language. iOS primarily uses Objective-C, And this language is, it's derived from a combination of Smalltalk and C. So Smalltalk was the object-oriented programming language, and C, of course. So it's cleaner and better, and it has certain features like blocks and categories, which which are very powerful. We will be learning about these in the later modules, but it gives more flexibility to the programmer, and of course, ARC, which is automatic reference counting, is being introduced in the later versions of iOS, so that makes memory management all the more easier for the programmer. Of course, in Android, it's Java, and they have better stack traces. So if when you're debugging or when you're going to the root of your problem, it's easier in because of the by virtue of Java's the Java language, and of course, garbage collection is there for memory management. And the APIs in iOS are simpler. Say, for example, something like CoData. The CoData class is pretty simple. So if you have to go inside the data, inside the source code for this class, it's you can go through that, you can navigate that, and you can fairly understand it. It's fairly simpler as compared to Android, because Android, any class, even a simple class, if you go in, it's got like more anonymous classes and inner classes. So when you go inside of a very simple, say, string class or a date class, when you go inside the source code for that, it's not that easy to navigate through it, which may be difficult when you're trying to extend a base class to include a very specific feature for your app. So that's with the APIs. And of course, in sharing, Android has access to file systems, which iOS currently does not have. And publication, when you're publishing your apps, iOS, I have published apps on the App Store, and I have always taken, I have earmarked a day or two exclusively for this, because it's quite complicated, because Apple wants to have tight control over your apps. So you need to have code signing, provisioning, certificates for each device. So it's very device dependent. This also helps because that way they know that whatever app is published on the iTunes or the App Store is of a certain baseline quality. So you do not have apps there which will, once they get downloaded by the user, they can just crash, or they behave in weird fashion. So this works, but from the developer point of view, yes, you have to. There is a little bit of hassle involved. Of course, eventually when you get the hang of it, and then it just becomes these many number of steps. On the other hand, Android is pretty handy, and it has a APK file which can run on any device. So generally, if you see, the Android market is more fragmented, right? It's more a community-based, a community kind of ecosystem. And when you as an app developer are making apps for the Android ecosystem, you need to ensure that they get tested in various devices and various versions, because there's a whole lot of them there. And it makes it all the more, there's a wide applicability. So it's like it's a cost benefit you have to do. Whether you want a wider outreach, then you have to work that much hard. You have to do testing. And most of these devices don't go in sync. So you may have a fragmented user base. Whereas when it comes to iOS, most of the users upgrade to the latest version. Whenever you get an upgrade alert, generally an iOS user will upgrade. And hence the user base is more disciplined, it's more cohesive. So, and that's why iOS is more stable, and it's got a stronger base in certain countries. and say like US, this is where they pay, the users are quite sophisticated and they don't mind paying. So as an app developer, you should be, bearing these things in mind. When you start with your first app, you would want to do it in an ecosystem where, there's a certain stability, there is certain, support for you. And yes, later when you, want to get into more geeky things, you can definitely go into Android. But my suggestion would be, if you want to start off with mobile app development, then this is the best platform.